All right, welcome back to the You Can't Fool You podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, the Vertigo Center, helping you find balance when the world won't stop spinning. So if you are a loved one or struggling with dizziness, vertigo, or imbalance, please visit thevertigocenter.com to take your first step towards steady living. And before we dive in, I just want to say thank you. This podcast is growing week by week, and it's because of people like you, the listeners, showing up, sharing episodes, and passing it along to somebody who needs it. So if you've gotten any value from these conversations, if something here has made you think, train harder, breathe a little deeper, and just take the step to becoming the best version of yourself, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes. I'm super excited about today's guest, Anthony Bacon. Thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me, Rock. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's
Looking
jump
forward
right.
to a conversation.
Yeah, me too. So let's jump right into it. What is your story? What do you do? Where did you come from, and how did you get to where you are right now?
I grew up in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. I was a three-sport athlete there. Ever since I was younger, I was the youngest of six. So I had a lot of great role models besides my mother and father. Being the youngest, I was able to, especially boy-wise, I had three sisters, two older brothers. So I was able to, they toughened me up. I was able to play with the older boys because of my brothers. And ever since I can remember, I played football, basketball, and baseball all the way up through elementary, middle school, high school, and ended up going to college. Went to for basketball. Went to Tennessee State University for a year. Great experience. This is way back before NIL and all that good stuff. You shook somebody's hand, a booster or something like that. You just put the little thing in your hand and you kept it moving. So everything was like under the table compared
Yeah.
to now. Everything's out in the open. Had a great experience there. Actually, my roommate made it to the NBA, Anthony Mason.
Okay.
Played for
Yeah.
several teams in the NBA. Unfortunately, Anthony passed away. But we had seven of us freshmen. We were 9-19. We lost like 10 games by like 3 points or less. At the end of midway through the season, Coach Martin um, resigned. He got his 500 victory, resigned. The assistant coach took over. Um, and then after he didn't get the job, they brought in a junior college coach. And to the junior
Right.
college coach credit, he said he was bringing a lot of his players in.
Yeah.
So I ended up transferring to Lock Haven University, where my sister went. Um, your dad,
My
was there as well for a little bit. Great experience. So I went from Division 1 to Division 2. Great experience. I wouldn't, change anything. I'm still, talk to all my teammates. We're still close, and I wouldn't change anything for the world. But a lot of it came up, through my upbringing and playing, three sports. Which I'm definitely. I talk to younger kids, high school
yeah.
kids. I'm big into playing multiple sports. You
Yeah.
talk to some people, they want that particular, boy or girl to just play that one sport. I've learned so much from football, basketball, and baseball that I
Yeah.
try to pass on to kids to this day.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of that too. Like just even when I was growing up, like when it was football season, I played football. Basketball season, it was
Yes.
basketball. Baseball, it's baseball. And having that gap in between, like football was always my favorite sport, and it wasn't even close what sport that I liked the best. But it was just like kind of the thing you did when it was you just played that sport in season. It gave you a little bit of a break, and when it was time to go play basketball again, I was excited to go play basketball, and would always remember you go out like shooting in the driveway, like man, the shot's off a little bit. I need to practice, and it was always a good reminder of how much I actually needed to practice. You know, but I didn't forget how to shoot a basketball. I didn't forget how to swing a baseball bat. I just needed to just get ramped up a little bit more. So I think it avoided all of the burnout. Like I never hated playing sports. I was always excited to go to practice or playing the games. I feel like nowadays I talk to like younger kids, like 10, 11, 12 years old, and they're not excited to play. It's like,
Yes.
dude, you're 12, man. Like that should be the best part of your day is going to practice, going to
Agree.
play the game. Um, and so right now you're coaching at Ruston High School
Yes.
basketball. Do you see this happening a lot with kids trying to be pushed into specializing early?
Not depending. Sometimes, it is. Sometimes I'll talk to the kids. I'll let them know, being this is my second year being the boys coach at Ruston, like we've had some athletes this past season that were on the football team. So I
Hmm.
talk to them like, listen, stay that to the end. I'm not going to pull you away from football to come play basketball. You
Yeah,
guys make the playoffs. You guys keep going. The basketball team will be here, when the football season is over. So me personally, I've always encouraged, even when I coached the girls for 5 years, I love another girl that she played soccer, field hockey, volleyball, whatever the sport was. Because I just think each sport teaches you something different mentally.
yeah, absolutely.
And I know like for myself, like football, was a whole different mentality than I was doing basketball.
Yeah,
And then like you just said about putting down the basketball now, it's different mentality because now I'm playing shortstop, for my high school team.
yeah,
So each sport and what each coach brought to that, still I try to pass on, to the kids today because I'm a firm believer that playing these multiple sports, I don't care what anybody tells me,
yeah.
is not wrong. Is
I
not
agree.
wrong. You
I'm
don't have to specialize in that one because there's only a handful of us that make it to the major leagues, to the
yeah.
NBA, and all these, basketball, baseball, football, NFL, whatever it is. There's only a handful of people that do that. And if you look back at most of these like Hall of Famers, they play more than one sport.
They play more than one sport. Yeah, I mean, I look at all the NFL guys that are coming out, like that are, if they have great NFL years or they had a big game, like on social media, what do you see? You see they're like, wow, look at this guy play high school basketball, and they're like,
Yes.
wow, he was really good at basketball too. Um, and that, he was playing in high school. I mean, I think about how many NFL guys. Let's just take the NFL football as an example. Were also could have went pro playing baseball. Could have also went pro playing basketball, maybe, or at least played at a high level, and they were still playing basketball, baseball in high school. Like they were playing both sports, even if they were the number one recruit in the country.
Three.
So then that leads me to the next question of how do you have that conversation with the parent? Because I think it's easier for them to accept the fact that, hey, my kid's unlikely to go professional in this. And I think a lot of people can accept that. But what about the parent who, you know, maybe their kid could get a scholarship to college? And if they play another sport and get hurt, that might impact their ability to get a scholarship. Maybe whoever will pull the scholarship, and now now there's a financial aspect that comes into play. How do you navigate or handle those conversations with parents?
So that's a great point you bring up. First of all, now that I'm, you know, dealing with the boys, I had the conversation with the student athlete first.
Yeah,
Because I want them to be able to, because eventually mom and dad will not be going to college with you. So you're
yeah,
gonna have to learn to communicate,
absolutely.
talk to a professor, talk to a coach, talk to a guidance counselor, without the assistance of mom or dad. So I had that
Hmm.
conversation with them. I want to look them in their eye and find out, do you want to play this or are you doing this because this is what mom and dad wants?
Yeah.
So for me, I spend most of my time conversation with the student athlete. Then I always say if your mom or dad has a question, they can feel free, to talk to myself. Because through
Yeah.
my experience, sometimes, you know, the parent's always going to try to do the best for their child, just like I try to do the best for our daughter. Your
Yeah.
parents try to do the best for you, and I understand that point. But sometimes, you have to have that honest conversation with them. Like, what does your son or daughter want?
Hmm.
Because they're the ones that are going through that. And in regards to like, well, stay with basketball, don't play football because they're going to go scholarship on, football. They could get hurt at practice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that can, there's always different variables that are in between that, but they're experienced because, your high school years, you're going to remember for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
You're not going to forget that. You're not going to forget that experience, with the fellas, you know, in that locker room,
Yeah.
the day of the game, whether you won or lost. They're lifelong memories, that you have. And I always like share to like you don't want to, man, I wish I would have. Then it's too late.
Yeah,
So
right,
learn from coaches who have experience to tell you, do it this way because I always tell the kids now, why would we as coaches tell you something that's going to hurt you?
right.
We're not going to do that because you guys do well. That means we do well as coaches. So it works together. And I
Yeah,
think once, you find the right kids and the parents that are like, you know what, I trust you, coach, you know, then their kids buy in, even more. Because the bottom line, when it's all said and done, it's about your son or daughter, and it's not
hmm
about mom or dad
yeah,
from a coaching aspect.
yeah, totally. Um, what are some of the more memorable moments that stand out to you over your coaching career that you remember? Coaching kids. What are some of those moments that stick out to you and that continue to push you to do what it is that you do?
I'll be honest with you. Here's what I remember the most. I don't remember championships. I remember seeing those kids, you know, after they graduated, whether they went to college or got a job, and them seeing me and come up to me and be like, Coach Bacon or
Mm,
Coach Tony, you know,
yeah,
thank you so much. The things that you talked about, I'm passing on, to other kids I'm mentoring, or if they might have a younger son or daughter, those things to me, because I always still, one of the things I still say, eventually the air out of the ball is going to leave.
yeah,
So what else did this sport give to you? What did this coach provide for you?
yeah,
And I'm trying to provide, learn from the mistakes I made myself.
yeah,
So I don't want, I want the kids to have, do this better than what I did. Even
yeah,
though I thought I did it okay, I could have got better because me and practice weren't the best,
yeah.
but you learn from it. And so I tell kids how important that practice is because there's not no magical switch that we put the uniform on now, and now
And then
I'm going to
all
give
of a
you my
sudden
A
it
game.
clicks. Yeah, no, no,
Yes,
it doesn't
no,
work that
you
way.
you 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 have to practice, and then that's how you're going to play. You miss layups in practice, you're going to miss them in the game.
Yeah,
So it's more so not so much about like the trophies or the t-shirts. It's about the progress that I see them, that they're growing up and becoming productive people in society, becoming great young men and young ladies. That I only ask them, pass this on to somebody younger than you, that somebody pass this on to you.
yeah,
So I'm more into that than to tell you like, hey, I remember this game that we played at Chester and we won or lost, or I remember this game at Ruston that we played. Do I remember it? Yes, but I remember, you know, how you've grown as a person.
hmm
That's the things that stick out, to me.
yeah. I feel like there's a lot of talk around how kids are today versus maybe when you were younger. How long have you been coaching now? How many years?
It'll be we're going on, I want to say roughly probably 30 years now.
30 years. So you have 30 years of coaching experience. Um, what is the biggest difference that you see? Is that true? Like there is a difference? Like what is the biggest difference in like when you started coaching versus how it is coaching kids now? I'm curious to know because I'm sort of a new coach trying to coach
Yes.
kids. So you have years and years of experience on me, and like everybody does say, it's oh kids are different these days. You can't do this, you can't do that. It's like, is that actually true, or what is the cold hard truth around this?
I think the truth from my experience, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just going to go from my
Yeah,
experience is parents are a lot more hands-on now than they were back then. Before you
yeah,
dropped your son or daughter off, you came back and picked them up.
right,
Now I walk into gyms. Now mom or dad want to sit in there and watch practice. Mom and dad want to sit in there and critique a coach. Mom or dad want to get their attention of their son or daughter while the coach is talking. So now you're
yeah,
putting your son or daughter in a bad situation because you're there for the coach. I always tell people, I don't want any parent in my practice. So when you drop your son or daughter off to school, are you sitting in the classroom with them? No, you're not. So this
right,
is, as our coach,
right,
this is our classroom. All we're
yeah,
asking is for 2 hours, and you'll get your son or daughter back. And what it does is it gives your child a chance to grow.
Hmm.
The old phrase now, like, there's a lot of helicopter parents.
Yeah.
I understand what you're trying to do, but you're not helping in any decision making for your son or daughter, because I think a lot of kids now struggle. You got to learn to handle hard better.
Hmm.
Everybody says, "Oh, it's going to get easier." It's going to no, life isn't easy.
Yeah.
As an adult, it's still not
No.
easy. But when you
Mm-mm.
figure out how to handle hard better, things will work out because
Yeah.
everything is not going to be easy. So, people always judge like, okay, we look at Michael Jordan and the Kobe's, like when they won the championships. What people fail to realize, like Michael Jordan in practice won every sprint.
Yeah.
He
Right.
was the best guy ever,
Right. Right.
so he was, leading that example. But, you have to give your son or daughter a chance to grow and like holding them by their hand is not helping them.
Yeah.
You still can be a part of their life, still be into that. But that's the biggest thing for me that I've seen adjustment wise, where my mom or dad dropped, or my brother or sister dropped me off at practice, and you didn't see them till you walked out of the gym or the football field or the baseball field.
Yeah.
And I think when parents are doing that, they're not allowing their son or daughter a chance to experience things on their own.
Right.
And you don't help us as coaches when you do that, because now it's okay, well, my dad told me to shoot it. Well, I don't want you to shoot it. I want you to
Yeah.
make that extra pass,
Yeah.
or my mom told me this, and it just makes it harder, you know, for the coaches, because we're obviously, as a coach, we're doing this because we're passionate about what we do. So we're going to make that we get the best out of your son or daughter. And for you, by you supporting us, it will help us more by going the other route, or holding them by their hand to watch practice. And I
Yeah.
think, you don't allow your child to grow, that's a part of being of maturity.
Yeah.
That's why they say, some kids, mature quicker than others, because at some time you have to, the old saying, cut that umbilical cord.
Yeah.
They're going to be okay because they
Yeah.
know mom and dad's going to be there for them, but learn to handle hard better, and things are going to work out for you in the long run. So it's
Yeah.
it's it's something I've adapted to, and I tell the, we all have boosters now, and never had
Yeah.
that before. So I understand, because boosters do a lot. So I don't want to, get it twisted that boosters, don't do a lot, because they really do, from, raising money and all those things, but at the same time, you know, don't sit there for 2 hours and critique us. That's unfair. You're not at our
Yeah.
practice. You're not in the locker room. You're not sure, the opponent that we're playing. So there's so many different variables that um, gives us as coaches sometimes a disadvantage.
Yeah.
My saying that I've said before, I don't come to your job and judge you in 2 hours. Please don't do it to myself and my coaching staff.
Yeah. That's a great point. Do you think, like, even at even at the high school level of sports, do you think, over your time coaching in that 30 years, has high school sports become maybe too sophisticated, where, you know, there's so much emphasis on, like, meetings and watching film, and like all that stuff is like super important to game plan, and you know get the best out when you go to compete on game day. But do you think high school sports has become more sophisticated because there is so much around, like the boosters and raising money, which is all good stuff, and bring attention to the program and getting the
Yes.
community involved, like all that stuff's great. Like I'm a big proponent for it, because I think high school sports, like, is the community of, like, wherever you're at. Certainly at Garnet
Agreed.
Valley, like Garnet Valley, at least the football team, like, is the Garnet Valley community, and that's amazing. But do you think it's become too sophisticated, where we are so focused on, all right, let's watch film, we're gonna have game plan and this, and putting all these hours into a high school practice, where it kind of takes away of, like, maybe what really the purpose of it should be? Like, is the way we handle high school sports today different than it was 30 years ago?
Well, the biggest thing, like technology, like you can break everything down now.
Yeah.
There's film out on everything and everybody, from people filming practices to getting film on each other. to breaking certain down things. Football, this is when the quarterback drops back, we can tell by his footwork if it's going to be a run or a pass. So a lot of sophistication is taking that part over. But I'm still like the old school adage person is, okay, we'll use football example. I know you're going to run the ball, right? That doesn't mean you need to pass the ball. You go with what you do. But those kids still have to block the other kids on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So it
Yeah.
comes to like who's going to be better than who on that particular play.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times sometimes people will change, because they try to outguess themselves or, with baseball, how they changed everything. Like you look, some of
Yeah.
these guys looks like it's a base hit up the middle. And because technology's saying, this person hits the ball there, that's not a base hit anymore.
Right.
So the technology like that has changed the game, a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing because you take advantage of the technology,
Yeah.
but sometimes you still, it's my best against your best. There's 10 seconds to go on the clock. I'm giving the ball to the best player. He needs to make a play. Everybody in the
Yeah.
gym knows who's getting the ball,
Yeah.
but you still have to stop him.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm thinking like, you know, from a coach's perspective, where I'm just going to use it as an example. Maybe it's not the best example to use, but what's the first one I could think of? Is like, all right, say there's lack of effort at practice, or there's too many, missed assignments or mental mistakes, which are not good things. Now you need to be disciplined for those things for sure. And so I feel like back in the day, um, what coach would freak out, and then you'd be running, right? What message is that? Is that the best approach? Now, likely, probably not, because now we're instead of like trying to spend time getting better, now you're just conditioning and getting tired. So, like from a strength and conditioning coach's standpoint, it's like, all right, you're just making them more tired. But there is kind of like a discipline that comes in with that. But the logic says for sure, like, all right, we don't need to be doing that. Like, drop down, give me 10 push-ups, and then let's get back to you know, running the play or, doing what it is we do. So that way we actually know we can spend more time practicing, wasting time not practicing now because we're running because you can't get it right. Um, but does that punishment in some way go a long way to like say, hey, I better make sure that I have my shit together when I come on the field. Otherwise, this is the consequence.
I agree because a lot of it is muscle memory. So what
Yeah.
I always like, running is not a punishment. You know, running is especially basketball, football. You need to be in shape to play this sport.
Yeah.
So it's a part of the accountability. You know, whether a coach is telling you nicely or a coach is digging into your behind to motivate you. So I always like to tell the kids, don't listen to how the message is being delivered. Listen to the message
Yeah.
because that's what a lot of kids get caught up in,
Yeah.
especially
How
boys.
how it's delivered. Yeah.
Yes, they're getting caught up in there like, oh, he's yelling at me. But listen to what the message is, why he's yelling at you.
Yeah.
And then once you
Yeah.
let that go, soak it in as a sponge, like a sponge.
Yeah.
And, we're going to have to do some conditioning. We're going to have to do some running. But, it's going to teach you like, okay, it's 4th and 2. And we're going to try to get this other team to jump all sides. We have to be mentally disciplined to hold our water that we don't get a legal procedure.
Yeah.
So that's certain things that's going to happen in practice. So when that kid does that in practice, the team has to be held accountable. So now
Yeah.
when that thing comes again, that everybody holds their water. Now we get the first down without even running a play. And to me, that's part of practice. That's part of coaching, because we can't be like, um, how can I say this in a nice way? The old everybody gets a trophy. That's not
Yeah.
reality.
Right.
That's not reality. If you're not going to your job, if you're not doing your job, you're going to get fired. They're not going to like give you 14 chances. That's not going to happen. So, and I know like the kids are in high school, but in 4 years, you're done. 4 years, you go to college or get a job. You're into the game of life now.
Yeah.
So, as coaches, we're trying to prepare them, for these things, and discipline is huge. I think everybody should be held accountable for something because if you don't, it's going to come back and bite you in the behind. as a
Yeah.
team,
Yeah.
you know. So that's
Uh,
what my biggest thing is, like, tell the kids, don't listen to, how the message is being delivered. Listen to the message, and it's going to help you.
yeah. I think that's good advice for just life in general because, you know, uh, I mean everybody you interact with is different, you know. So like if you always listen to how the message is delivered, you're gonna get offended by so many things because some people just don't. I mean, some people might have good intentions, but they just don't say things in a nice way, you know. But it's also the reverse. Some people say things in a nice way, and their intention is, you know, not nice either. Um,
Exactly.
and so, right, I like that. Listen to what the message like. It's almost like just read between the lines. You know, what is the
That's all it is.
message? What is the message? What?
Because we know when we do that, you know, we're going to talk to that certain athlete anyway. We're going to, whether we put an arm around them, a little
Yeah,
pat on the shoulder, or something to pick them up, because it works hand in hand. You just can't, like, digging the kids behind, and
yeah. You
never
can't.
tell them anything positives. You
Yeah,
still gotta. Everybody still likes, positives, like, hey, that's a good job here, good job there. Everybody likes to hear that.
yeah,
Nobody wants to hear negative, 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 negative.
yeah,
So it works hand in hand, and to the point where I like to get where the kids will look at you and be like, "Coach, that was on me. I didn't run the play the right way."
yeah. Now
So when I saw,
they're taking ownership of it now.
absolutely, and once they take ownership on that, we sit back as coach and look at each other like they're getting it. They're
Yeah,
getting it. Or when, I always say, like, why do I have to be the bad guy? You're a senior on this team, you're a leader on this team. Confront your peers. That's an aspect that doesn't happen where the coaches always have to be the bad guy.
that yeah, right,
When you
right.
when you find that team that the peers confront each other, we can all be friends. I use for myself when I played, like, I was one of those guys, like, I wanted to win so bad, like, I would be like, man, I'm not trying to, lose to my sisters or my brothers. Like, we're going to compete, but
Yeah,
that's still my family. I'm going to love them at the end of the day. But for this particular
yeah,
game we're playing right, I'm trying to win,
yeah,
you
right.
know? And that's what these guys have to understand. Like, we can still be friends. We're going to be friends, but you have to respect me as an athlete, to confront each other. And I think when you see teams, do that, it helps the coaches too, and it helps the team as well.
Yeah,
Because you got to find that leader on the team, because we're not always going to be in the locker room. We're not always in the hallways. We're not always, around the kids after school. They're spending a lot of time with each other. They're with us for 2 hours, a long bus ride or something like that. But other than that, if they help each other out like that, you'll see it on the field, on the court, on the baseball
absolutely.
field.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, you know, um, and I mean this in like a good way, but some like your team, you need a couple assholes. Like you need a
Yes.
couple assholes, people to stir the pot. Like, you know, you don't want to be fighting at practice all the time. But if a fight breaks out at practice, I mean, is it the worst thing in the world? I don't know. I don't think
Nowadays,
so.
people nowadays people would say so. Back in the day, that was an occurrence
Yeah, I
that just
think it
happened.
like it's you're competing
Uh,
against each other. You know, like I mean,
exactly.
especially in football. You think about like you go through camp and you know you've been playing offense, defense, and you've only been hitting each other. You've been hitting the same your teammates, the same guys. You just start to
Yes.
get like, dude, I hate the defense, you know, and so you just start jawing at each other, and like that's
Yes.
I don't know, I don't think it's a bad thing, you know. You're still team
I
because
don't think
once you either Friday night or Saturday, you shut the helmet on, and you're playing against a team with different colors, and it's like, all right, we got this together. Everything changes, you know.
I agree.
I don't think a fight at practice is like the worst thing in the world, you know. It keeps everybody in check, and I think you need a couple assholes.
Nothing wrong with competitive juices,
No, not at
because
all.
you you need that within your own team without a coach bringing that out in you.
Yeah,
If I have to scream at you, game day or halftime on a consistent basis, I shouldn't have to get you hyped. I shouldn't, we're going to get them hyped up as coaches, but at some point you have to get yourself ready to go.
yeah,
And how does that go? How you prepare for practice that week before you played your opponent in football.
yeah. Absolutely. I want to ask this question because you said you did coach girls, now you coach boys. What is the biggest difference between coaching girls and coaching boys?
Great question. That was a great experience, for myself. I went from, like, coaching at Glum Mills. to all boys to come into wrestling to coach girls, and it was like the best. I'm so glad I did it. So I
Yeah.
mean, it helped me that I have a daughter, first and foremost, but it taught me patience.
Yeah.
And girls are so more fundamentally sound because they don't try to do any fancy stuff.
Yeah.
They're not dunking, they're not, flying in the air doing crazy stuff, but they're so fundamentally sound and they listen,
Yeah. I would
and
agree.
my experience at wrestling coaching those girls, I still have relationships and I see those kids to this day. Did I have my moments at times? They're like, Coach Tony, that one time at halftime, you raised your voice and we were ready to go play, but we laugh about it. But in the same breath, they knew there was nothing that Coach Tony would not do for those kids.
Yeah.
So the relationship that I got with those young ladies, was priceless to me. Because
Yeah.
I went in not sure how this was going to play out from being around boys, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Great experience, great young ladies. The head coach over there was Lauren Stackhouse at the time, gave me the
Yeah.
opportunity. And, she even told me, like, hey, you're going to be surprised. Like, once the girls trust you, they're going to tell you some things, and be open with you. I'm like,
Yeah.
you weren't kidding about that. Like,
Yeah.
Coach Tony, you said about this or you said about that. But girls are so more open and like will come and talk to you about
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Where, us as guys, we're not gonna always gonna go talk to our male coach and
No.
say, well, I got this problem or I got that problem. Unless you have like that certain kids will just come stand next to you without saying anything. You'd be like, all right, Rock, what's going on? You're standing here for 2 minutes, you're not saying nothing. You need to talk. Oh, yeah, yeah, coach, I need this. Okay. Well, why don't you just come up to me and ask me that 2 minutes ago? We could have saved
Yeah.
some
Right.
time,
Right.
so that,
Just.
but it was different like that with the girls where they would just be open, to you. And it was, it was awesome.
Yeah.
It really was. It was a great, we had great teams, great coaches, great girls. And, it was an awesome experience, but it definitely taught me patience,
Yeah. Of
because
course.
in a
Yeah.
good
In a
way,
good
because I
way.
always wasn't the most patient with the boys.
Yeah.
I became a lot more patient with the girls.
Which then probably made you a better coach.
Absolutely did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so with that, how important is, we do always talk about like the fundamentals and practicing the skill and getting in the weight room and understanding the playbook and things like that, and then going out and actually executing. But how important is focusing on, say, the mental and emotional part of sports? Because a lot of times what people think, say, sports is a mental game. And I think when they're referring to that, they think about knowing the playbook, knowing the defense. Yes, those are all mental. Those are mental parts of the game, but those are parts of the game, not in the mental mindset, emotional confidence sort of way in sports. You know, now there's a bigger push now for sure, probably than ever, about mental fitness is what we would call it around sports, and people are a lot more open to all those things now. How important is it actually, and not just at the highest levels, but even for high school kids?
I like to focus a lot on preparation in
Yeah,
practice. I always tell the kids like the practice is our time, the game is your time. You
yeah,
know, like we're giving you all the answers to the test. Now on game day, go pass the test.
yeah,
So if we prepare mentally, physically, and practice, to me, I think the game is the easy part. Only
hmm,
difference is you're putting on a uniform and there's people in the bleachers.
yeah,
But if you're not prepared mentally and physically in practice, it's going to show in the game. So people
hmm,
might say, man, I can't believe you guys lost that game. But we know as coaches, we know going into a game what kind of feel we're going to have, by what kind of practice we have. I know
hmm,
that's been my experience. I can tell and get that feeling that we're going to struggle Tuesday night because our practice Saturday and Monday was not up to par. And we
yeah,
think we're just going to show up on game day and win this game, and it's not going to happen. And we've lost games like that. And I've told the kids because our work ethic and practice was horrendous.
Yeah.
And just because we're putting a uniform on doesn't mean that, we talked about that magical switch a little bit earlier in our conversation. We don't have that. I don't think kids understand the emphasis that us as coaches try to have them to put in practice.
Yeah.
That their preparation and practice will get them ready for the game and not game day. Because everybody else is going to tell them game day, game day, game day.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Us as coaches, football, you got Monday through Thursday, to prepare them. And if they're not focused in that, by Friday as a coaching staff, it's going to be a problem. It's
Yeah.
going to be a problem,
Yeah.
and until kids can buy into the preparation of practice and doing things in practice to not like, you know, you got to have that like little timeout and have that little laughter or whatever, and then get back to business. That it doesn't have to be, business, 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 business. You can have that little moment, give them that water break and have a little laugh. But let's get
Yeah.
right back to work, so we can laugh even more at the end of a night on a Friday night in the locker room because we
Yeah.
just won the game,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
does it always work? No, but us, if they're prepared and it doesn't go our way, then we just have to look at each other and say, you know what, that team was better than us this Friday.
Yeah.
But with
Absolutely.
that, we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
But I can't emphasize the preparation for practice that I don't think student athletes nowadays understand how important it is.
Yeah. Two things off of that. One of the I haven't had a lot of conversations with a lot of kids. Um, the one I think there's a common theme that I feel like, and I don't think this is anything new. I don't think it's anything new that kids aren't confident. A lot of kids lack confidence, and I don't think that's a new thing. I think it's pretty
Mhm.
normal for kids not to be confident. Especially in high school, there's just a lot of things going on.
Yes,
Um, but I do think, how do you handle that conversation with the kid? And I think you already answered it based off of your last things. Preparation. If you prep, that's where your confidence is going to
absolutely.
come from. Because if you're just focusing on the outcome and the outcome doesn't go your way, then of course, yeah, okay, you're not going to be, because you're only focused on the outcome. But if you're focusing on the preparation, that's where your confidence really does come from. And I think, you know we kind of focus too much on the outcome. And so, like you said, kids are just ready to jump in and play games. And maybe that's because of AAU culture, travel team culture. Like, they're playing games all the time instead of actually going to practice. So how do you handle that? What is your opinion on that? Are kids playing too many games and not practicing enough?
First, I agree with what you said. People, especially kids, focus on more outcome than preparation.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. You need to prepare for things in your everyday life. If you're not prepared, the old adage, you're going to get caught with your pants down. Don't
Yeah.
ever get caught with your pants down. Be
Yeah.
prepared. Teacher's going to give you a quiz. They tell you the day before the quiz is coming. Don't
Yeah.
sit there and blame the
Yeah.
teacher the next day when
You didn't do your job.
she or
You
he
didn't.
gave you 5 questions. You got them all 5 wrong. I told
Yeah.
you what was going to happen. So that means
Yeah.
you weren't prepared. Um, in regards to games, kids will always say, "Well, coach, I played all summer." But then you come into the gym, to the field, or wherever you're at, and you still can't dribble the ball with your left hand. So what did you really do all summer? What did you do
Well.
all summer? You worked on the things that you know you can do
Mhm.
because you focused on the outcome.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stay going to my right all summer, and then now when you come to the league, to our league, and you playing league games, well, they scout you and they're making you go left, and you can't go left.
You can't go left. Yeah.
And that's what happens because they're more worried on the outcome. You you don't get better during the games.
Mhm.
You get better in practice. You get better preparing in practice. So you can have a positive outcome. But
Yeah.
I think, it's tough for kids now because everything is based on outcome
Mhm.
and not on preparation,
Yeah.
and I think and it's a different culture now. And me as a old head coach, what the kids will say, you know, the fundamentals of the game doesn't change. The fundamentals of football does not change.
No.
Yeah, yeah, it's fast break on grass now, and I get all that, but it's still this lineman has to block this person.
Yeah.
This receiver has to run this
Blocking and
route.
tackling, catching and throwing.
Yes. Like the fundamentals don't change. It, has to become faster, yes. But the fundamentals in any sport, look at, Steph Curry. If any of these kids will watch his pre-game rituals and
Yeah.
watch what he does, they're enamored with his outcome that he's making all these threes.
But
People don't see the preparation that he's done to do that.
yeah.
LeBron James at his age, the preparation that he works on, just his body alone.
Yeah.
Everybody sees on game day. That's not realistic. You
Yeah.
know, um, sometimes it makes it hard for us as coaches to get this because it ties back to I always tell whether it's a boy or a girl, if I didn't have confidence in you, you wouldn't be on this team. So
Yeah.
stop
Right.
second guessing yourself. Stop
Right.
second guessing yourself. Have that confidence. And I know it's a lot tougher now because, I know when I coach girls, girls are judged differently than boys.
Hmm.
So girls have it tough, and I know that from having three sisters, from what you wear to how your hair looks
Oh
to what
yeah.
your makeup looks like, you are getting judged all the
Constantly.
time.
Yeah.
We could do whatever, have holes in our t-shirts,
Yeah.
wherever, and ain't nobody saying anything to us.
Yeah.
So it's different. Like you have to go through the school day like that. Now you have to come to practice, you know, and you try to what I've learned in my past, where when you see that boy or girl, they come to practice, but you can see that look on their face, I always walk up to them.
Yeah.
You didn't have a good day today. Tell me what's going on before we even start practice. Let's talk real quick,
Yeah.
you know, and it teaches them to like, you can get through this. My old adage, what I said earlier, learn to handle hard better.
I
Because
love that.
is it
Yeah.
really that bad? Is it really that hard? Or do we just need to handle the situation better? And
Yeah.
then once you learn to handle situations better, you're going to take that with you in the
Yeah.
game of life, you
Yeah.
know?
Similarly, somebody I listen to a lot is Jim Rohn. He's dead now, but he was like a motivational speaker, and this guy from Idaho, like super witty and old, and he one of the things he said is like, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better, wish you acquire more skills, wish you had more skills, and then go do the things to get the things. So don't wish it was easier, wish you were better, and then do the things to get better.
Yes.
Because it's always do the thing that's going to push you to get the most out of you. And so if that means grinding it out through practice because you've had a bad day, then like that's it. I remember a couple of guys, some of my boys from high school, we always said you were never upset. You never did something really hard or like say you had really hard conditioning or whatever. You never we never walked away after doing something really hard that sucked and said, "Man, I wish I didn't do that." We never said it. We were always like, "All right, that was awesome." But we never said we wish we didn't do it.
Yes.
You know. So every time I think about doing hard things, you're never gonna walk away saying, "I wish I didn't do that." You're always gonna be proud that you did it.
A lot of kids, you have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because everybody does what they're comfortable with. When you start doing stuff that's uncomfortable and that becomes comfortable for you, you're going to grow. You're going to grow.
Yeah.
You got to be able to come out of your own comfort zone because you don't grow out of your own comfort zone.
Yeah. Right.
Whether it's hanging around the same people, doing the same thing. You have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, a lot of people don't want to say, okay, well, I need to work on this in this particular sport, or I need to work on this, in the classroom harder, or I need to work on this on the field harder. You know, we don't want to do that. Sometimes we don't want to push the kids to do that. But some of the times the kids want they want that. They need that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, because, I know times have changed, but there's kids that still want to be coached. There's still
No,
kids that want to be
definitely.
coached
Yeah.
hard and
Absolutely.
they appreciate that. They'll tell you like, did you make us mad? Like I was like, you can get mad at me all you want. We're trying to do this as coaches so you guys become better. So you guys
Yeah.
become mentally stronger between your ears. It's never a battle about, as a coach, there's no kid that that I ever coached that I'm going to be like, it's a personal thing. It's never personal,
Yeah, no, no.
you know? And then, it's our job to get the best out of you. And sometimes
Absolutely.
when you're being pushed, you get mad at that person, whether it's
Absolutely.
mom or dad doing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me go ask mom because dad said no. And then when you find out that mom says no too, that they're on the same team, like okay,
Yeah.
that but things are different like that.
Yeah.
But once they get and understand, and for myself, like I said, coaching, being an old head coach, you learn to adapt to certain things that the kids like. Like I'm
Yeah.
not a big Instagram and all that stuff, but I know the kids like their stuff to be out there so people know on
So
Instagram.
people say,
So
yeah,
instead of me fighting that battle,
right.
one of my coaches does that. And I know the kids love that. So I'm not going to take that away from the kids because of my old ass is stuck in old ways.
Yeah, right. Right.
We have to adapt as coaches to what,
Certainly.
what these kids, what it is now. There's
Certainly.
social media all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't want to take that away from the kid or give them an opportunity because, Coach Bacon is stuck in his old ways and doesn't like the Instagram thing. It's
Yeah,
not about
right.
me liking it. It's about, what's going to be beneficial for the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, as we start to wrap this up, over your journey, who have been some of your biggest mentors and influences, from being a coach to a player? Who are the people that have influenced you the most?
I'm gonna say it stayed, in my own household. They were the
Yeah,
best teammates I've ever played with.
yeah,
And people will like ask me that, and like I played on a lot of teams, played on championship teams, but my brothers and sisters were my best teammates that will be irreplaceable by any teams I've played with.
yeah,
And that's for me. Some people will say like this athlete or athlete, it is my own family, and my
yeah,
father, my role model.
yeah,
He was, military guy for 20 years. You know, did I always agree with how we were raised and everything? But I'm so glad that he put a foot in my ass when he did,
yeah,
and because it taught me so much. Did I like it at first? No. And I tell the kids, there's things that you're not going to like, but within my own home, they were my best teammates, and my dad was my role model by far. Did I have coaches going the way that helped me? Yes, but it was nothing like I got within my own four walls of my home.
yeah,
Like that was priceless. And to this day, my mom and dad aren't here anymore. But it was still my family. Like it
yeah,
was the best team that I could ever play for by
yeah.
far.
I love that answer. That's a great answer. Is there anything that we didn't get to touch on today that you feel the need to share or want to speak on?
I think you brought up like topics that people are scared to talk about, quite honestly.
Yeah,
So I want to thank you for bringing that to light. I hope the listeners, take a piece of what we both said,
yeah,
and if we can only get through to whether it's, if there's X amount of people listening, we can get a handful that listen and appreciate, what you're doing to try to help these youth out because we need, younger coaches like yourself to keep this going.
yeah,
So I want to thank you for doing this first and foremost. Thank your family. They raised a great young man, in yourself. Your mom and dad are the best and it shows with you. So I appreciate that. But keep doing what you're doing and keep your young coaches going. And sometimes, as coaches, we get caught up in the W's and L's. Don't do that.
yeah,
Look those boys and those girls in their eyes and that we're teaching them every day. Because at the end of the day, those trophies get dust on them. Those trophies
yeah,
fall
yeah.
apart. T-shirts get holes in them.
Yep.
But people's hearts don't forget what we're trying to teach them.
I
So,
love that.
keep going, keep going. People get judged sometimes on wins and losses. Now, the wins and losses is these kids going to school every day because it's harder for kids now.
Yeah,
There's
definitely.
so more obstacles, and kids unfortunately are taking their own lives,
Yeah,
because, whether being bullied or somebody didn't talk to them or whatever the case may be. I want you guys as younger coaches to keep pushing, for that boy, that girl, and not always worried about the W's and L's because we are helping so many kids, and that's what this is about. Are the championship rings nice? Are the banners nice? Are the pep rallies with, and the parades? They're awesome. Don't get me wrong. They are awesome.
Yeah.
but we all can't, you know, do certain things like that. There's sometimes that, we lose games and I look at the kids and like, we didn't lose the game, we just ran out of time,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely.
So you try to get like valuable lessons, on each thing. And I think, what you younger coaches, keep doing this, it can get frustrating at times, but you guys keep moving on, man. Like I'm proud of you and I'm proud of any young coach that, that I see because it's always easy to be a coach in the stands.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
realize the time that we put in, the time that we away from our families. I thank my wife every day. I spend a lot of time away from her and my daughter, but they know what I'm passionate about. And once you're passionate about something, nobody's going to get in your way. They're just going to support you. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate you and what you're doing, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you. I appreciate you being on. And that's it, helping kids become the best versions
Yes.
of themselves. That's the ultimate goal as a coach. So, thank you for being on. This conversation was awesome. If you're listening and this conversation really resonated with you, please share with somebody that you think should hear this conversation. And let's continue to support youth, high school, and college athletes in becoming the best versions of themselves.